list remain the same. I hope the list of participants. Yeah. Good afternoon. We are ready to start our last but one session. We have 1 hour. I have 6 speakers. We have a question that everyone would answer. Then we have several new commitments to be made, all in 1 hour. And therefore, I'm sorry, I'll just have to be quite ruthless on time. I hope it doesn't make me lose friends, but it's my job for now. Now, we have traveled already 3 years, 3 years yesterday, since the first Maya declarations. That was September 2011. So last year we had the second, and this year it's the third. And over that time, already 43 of us have made commitments. And therefore, this session will focus on evaluating progress that we have made. And we have, among the 6 speakers, 3 who will speak to progress made, and 3 who will speak to facilitation in country, to the extent that they engage with the government. Now, maybe just a few words. I'll use just 5 minutes instead of 10, which was allocated. Maya Declaration is a unique commitment instrument made in AFI. AFI can claim to have made a major contribution to approaches to commitment technology on the policy sphere. And in this case, partly because it's a bottom-up approach, and there are no global targets. Each country makes targets starting from where they are and on the basis of conditions that obtain in the specific context. Those commitments, however, are made in front of all members, which provides now the framework for mutual support to achieve the measurable targets. And this is not just through peer learning, but in some cases, support for capacity building, and also through peer pressure, which provides the incentive for implementation. But one thing you'd note, there is no conditionality, which makes it quite unique. A key issue, however, that I would like the panelists also to speak to is how these commitments made here in AFI are translated into national policy targets and national strategies, so that it doesn't appear like AFI has set targets for any country. You know, when we are here as policymakers, we do not represent the full spectrum of the policy-making process in our countries. And therefore, one of the challenges typically that we have is to be able to champion the process to a level where we can get national targets, strategies, and monitoring frameworks. So that is quite an important intermediate stage that hopefully we can also hear how far we have gone, apart from hearing how much you have achieved, because of the fact that it is important that we make this a national process. So let me call on the first speaker, Daniel Sidlowski, Superintendent, SBS Peru. So if you could give us the progress made so far and what lessons you'd like the rest of us to take.
Well, in Maya, at the Riviera Maya, we went out on a limb, and we said we were going to do a bunch of things, because we thought if we were going to be brave, we were likely to accomplish more. We thought we probably wouldn't going to be able to do everything we promised, but better promise more and deliver more, even if we fell a little short of the goal. As it turns out, actually, I'm happy to say that we managed to do pretty much everything we promised. Perhaps not as perfectly as we would like, so we have some cleanup to do. But we did accomplish pretty much everything. The most important thing was that we got a law approved for electronic money, which is a very fine and very modern law. We've had a meeting this afternoon looking at how what the particular elements are, and that seems to be quite an accomplishment. We've increased our cash in and out points and corresponding cashiers by 50%, which is what we promised to do. We got basic and simple accounts put in place, which is what we promised to do. Can't say the banks use a lot of them yet, but we'll get there. But they're there. We substantially increased the transparency of information for the customers. We've reformed the contract language. We have it in simple Spanish now, so that anybody who wants to understand it can probably understand it. We've reviewed the contracts between the financial system and its clients to make the contracts fairer. Now, a part of that has been a new insurance law, which is the first law in 110 years. And that has allowed us to, yes, we're working with an insurance law dating back to 1902. And so it was a little outdated. And this new law has allowed us to, do a lot of things that needed to be done. So we're now working to modernize insurance contracts. So those are the things that we've accomplished. And the question is, why was it possible to do all this? And I think it was a combination. Catch-up is always easier than when you don't have much to do. So there was a lot of catch-up to do. That was one element. Number two, I think the fact that we were at AFI and at the Riviera Maya, and we were asked to say what could we do and what would we do, and the team got together, and there was a new superintendent, so the team said to the superintendent, here's things we can do. The superintendent thought this was he's an enthusiastic fellow, this superintendent. You may have already perceived that. And so we said, all right, let's go for it. And we went for it. So I think that had something to do. So enthusiasm helps. And we were also lucky because Peru's done nicely in its economic growth the last several years. When things are going well, it's easier to make changes and to improve things. So the climate was also favorable. So I think, we made hay while the sun shone. And those are the results. Now the challenge is, and I know you're going to come back to this later, what do we do from here on? And we've done a bunch of things. There's still some things left to do, and I'll come back and talk about those later, I assume.
You do that now.
Now, I see. Oh, my goodness. You want everything in one fell swoop. All right. We don't yet have a national inclusion strategy that's sort of agreed within the government. So our big task is to get a national strategy in place. We have elements of it. We have had discussions. but this needs to become sort of a formal government commitment. And that's, I think, the big challenge. Now, within that, there's various things that need to be done. There's a whole piece of that. A range of things that need to underlie that are quantification. We need to measure a bunch of things, and we've got surveys underway. You name it, we've got a survey. I won't go through the whole list. There's about 8 of them. And over the next year, we'll get these results coming in, so we will stand on firmer ground because we'll have better data. Better data is always a good thing to stand on, and then we can move forward from there. We've also going to have develop a mapping tool so that we can geographically define where there are opportunities. Thanks to GPS, there's lots of things you can do now. We have a very difficult geography, so the mapping tool will be very helpful. That's underway. We'll have that within this coming year. We will move forward in financial education. We have a very active program with school teachers. We're going to widen that, deepen that. We'll go down from high school to lower level schools and move sideways. We're talking to some industry groups. And so there's going to be a lot more financial education done. We're going to try to leverage what we can do more in various directions. We will do 2 other things that are very important in the market for finance. One is the regulatory framework for microinsurance. There's a lot of room for deepening our microinsurance market. And since we've just updated the whole insurance regulation law, this is the time now to move the next step on microinsurance. And on the other side of the market, we are moving in the direction of group credits, and we haven't had a proper regulation on group credit. So we're putting that in place right now. That'll be probably in place in the next 60 days. And that we expect that to lead to the connection of informal borrowing groups to the bottom of the financial system. This is a very delicate operation. We hope to be able to report back a year from now what success we've had with that. But this is something we have great hopes on. And then there's another thing that we're starting, which I want to share, which is the use of psychometric techniques in order to incorporate excluded populations. The issue here is that when you try to bring somebody into the financial system, you don't know whether they're going to be good or bad credit risk. You essentially cover your bets by charging a high price. If you had a good way to separate the sheep from the goats, you could price this thing differently. Now, the way you can do this is by trying to gather this information about the person who's going to be credit risk. We do this by, at the moment, through our microcredit system with extensive interviewing, lots of studies, very expensive. It turns out there are psychometric techniques that would shortcut this extensively. They come out of the evaluation of employment evaluation and job search and so on and so forth. We believe we can refine this with the people that know about this stuff so that we will be able to fairly effectively predict people's willingness to pay. Now, if you can, honesty and willingness to pay, if you can lower the cost of defining that, you have a way to bring people into the system who are going to be good credit risks. This is going to be our most interesting challenge for the next year. And we'll come back to you next year at our AFI meeting and tell you how we fared with that. If we do well, some others of you might want to try it. We don't know yet. We have high hopes for it, and it looks good, but better to, proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating. In this case, the proof of the psychometrics is going to be on the results. So that's our plan for next year. As you can see, it's a fairly rich menu. I must say from where I sit that with the collaborators we have at the Superintendencia, I think we're going to be able again to deliver. And I feel very blessed that I've got these collaborators. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Very successful experience. It's good progress. So, without spending time on summarizing what you said, because it was already in summary,
Better be.
we now move to the experience of Nigeria, the progress report for that. Kingsley Chiedu Mogalu, Deputy Governor, Central Bank of Nigeria.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is this working? Is
Yes.
it working? It's not working.
Not yet.
Yeah. I want.
Just raise your arm, probably. Just they should see you.
Oh, really? Okay.
Whoever is working with technology.
No.
Oh, okay.
Is it on? It's
Okay.
on?
All right.
Okay.
Oh, it was himself.
I'll
yes.
just hold it. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you, moderator. In Nigeria, we have we made a commitment in the Mayor Declaration to reduce adult financial exclusion in Nigeria from 46.3%, which was where it was in 2010, to 20% in 2020. Now, since it's not 2020 yet, we're not sure whether we have accomplished everything, but we have some time to be able to measure ourselves. But the important thing, in addition to that commitment, is that the Central Bank of Nigeria conceptualized a national financial inclusion strategy for Nigeria. So we do have in our own country an overarching strategy which has some specific targets for two basic aspects of financial inclusion. The first is services to be delivered by financial inclusion, and the second is channels for delivering those services. We have specific targets for payments, for savings, for credits, for insurance, for pensions. For example, in payments, in 2010, there were 21% of adult population in Nigeria that had access to payment systems, but we are targeting 70% by 2020. Savings, we had 24%. Our target for 2020 is 60%. Credit, we had 2%. Our target is 40%. Insurance, we had 1%, and our target is 40%. And for pensions, we had 5%, and the target is 40%. Now, targets for channels as well, or access points, and we measure this per 100,000 adults. And we have targets for channels such as branches of deposit money banks, branches of microfinance banks, automated teller machines, ATMs, point-of-sale machines, and mobile agents. So our strategy, our national strategy in Nigeria is quite specific. And we've made quite some progress to attain these targets. And in that process, we've been able to establish an agent banking framework, which has been approved and released by the Central Bank of Nigeria. We've also approved a tiered Know Your Customer framework, KYC, which really breaks down the KYC requirement in a manner that does not promote financial exclusion, but allows us to bring more people into the financial system with a tiered level of requirement of documentation and identification going down the ability, the financial ability of various citizens. Now, we also have a financial literacy framework. And in the central bank, we created a consumer protection department, which has the responsibility for the implementation of our financial consumer literacy framework. We have very active mobile systems being deployed in Nigeria now. 18 mobile money operators have been approved. And we are revising the framework to see how telecommunications companies can play some additional role in providing infrastructure by using them as agents. Now, in my country, in Nigeria, the mobile payments system is bank-led. It's not telco-led. But there has been a lot of push by telcos to really have the same status as the banks. Our problem, of course, as it is in some of the countries where this is the case, is that the telecommunications companies in Nigeria are not regulated by the Central Bank of Nigeria. And so we didn't want companies getting into financial services that we could not regulate. So we're looking at this. One possibility in the longer term could be the establishment of special purpose vehicles by telcos, and those SPVs will be regulated exclusively by the Central Bank of Nigeria. That's one possibility. We haven't taken a decision, but that's one way that we're looking at it. We've also set up a financial inclusion secretariat, in the central bank. So we're really making very serious moves on a very large scale to increase financial inclusion in Nigeria. And most recently, the Central Bank of Nigeria announced a $1.5 billion MSME fund, a micro, small, and medium enterprises fund. That was launched in August, just about a month ago, and 60% of this fund will provide support to women entrepreneurs. 80% of it will be micro enterprises, and 20% will go to SMEs. And the fund will give wholesale loans, it will undertake refinancing activities and give facilities, guarantees, and give grants. So these are some of the things we've done. We've had some significant achievements between 2010 and now. We know that while our financial exclusion rate was 46% in 2010. Now it's about 39%. So we've tried to measure. We, as the central bank, have not yet set up a measurement system, but we make very good use of a lot of the work done by Enhancing Financial Innovation and Access, EFINA, which is a non-profit organization that's based in Nigeria, and we make use of their reports. And that report shows us that we've made quite significant progress, and we've brought down exclusion from 46% to 39% over the past 3 years. So we can see that we're already making quite a lot of progress. So, Moderator, I'd like to summarize that, and I think it's clear that by 2020 we'll be quite. We believe that we'll be able to achieve our commitments under the Mayor Declaration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this progress report. You have already began putting the major building blocks for 2020, but you're already seeing some results. Maybe just one question. Are the national targets in the strategy still reflective of what you had committed in the Maya? Or has there been any difference?
I believe that it's still broadly reflective. However, I suspect that as we've gone into the details, we might have sort of amplified some of the things that we believe we should do. Our Maya Declaration was a broad statement at the time. The strategy followed it. The strategy didn't come before it. So it's a strategy that flows from what we have committed to at the Maya Declaration. And it is quite possible that we could actually exceed the commitments we made at Maya. That would be a very nice outcome.
So there might actually be value for us always to ask countries that have gone through this process if they need to restate their commitments in light of the national process they would have gone through, so that we have some consistency between what is reflected against the country's name. I think this is more broadly the applicable case. And now we go to our dear hosts, Malaysia, and to give us the progress on Malaysia's commitment is Muhammad Ibrahim, Deputy Governor, Bank Negara, Malaysia.
Thank you, Governor. It has been 1 year since we declared our commitment to the Maya Declaration. There are two things that we benefit from it. One is that it cemented our ideas on financial inclusion. Second, it gives us focus. Governor, it's one of the best decisions that we have made on financial inclusion. So we are quite happy that we made this a year ago. I have about 1,001 things I want to say, Governor, but I'm going to categorize it into three broad areas. One is on the adoption of innovative solution. Second is on the outreach to the rural areas. And third is on the strengthening institutional arrangement and capacity building, including financial literacy. On the first area of adoption of innovative solution, we have embarked into two major initiatives. The first one is on agent banking network. As Governor Zeti have pointed out yesterday, financial inclusion is one of our charter in the Central Banking Act. So we are accountable to Parliament on this. And in Malaysia, there are two components of administration. One, what we call the district, and then the second part we call the sub-district. I'm happy to report, Chairman, that as far as the district is concerned, we have covered 100%. And we have covered 100% the parliamentary seats, a district or constituency. And we have covered 100% of the state legislative assembly seats. So we call it the smart policy. And we are now drilling into the sub-district. Now our achievement is about 87%. So next year we are targeting to cover at least 90%. And if we look at when we embark on the agent banking framework and when we measure our performance now, we are about 12 months ahead of schedule. And in terms of transaction, Chairman, we have recorded about 6.5 million transactions, totaling $270 million in terms of the volume. And we want to basically put on record our appreciation to Brazil and Mexico. We have learned a lot from them. It's basically peer learning in action. The second part is on the mobile platform. We are just embarking on this, but we have been able to cover more than 90% of mobile users. So far, about 131,000 users have been using it, about 500,000 transactions. For this year and next, we hope to exceed more than this figure, at least an improvement of 50%. Let me move on the second part, Governor, is on the outreach to rural areas. Yesterday, we displayed the mobile link bus outside. That mobile link bus have access to about 130 sub-districts. We are able to service about 200,000 people over the last 12 months. So we thought that is quite encouraging. The second part is on, we have offices in various parts of the country. So what we are doing is that we are upgrading those branches into regional office. And we expand the scope of that regional office, not only to cover our normal distribution of currency, but also to cover financial literacy, and also to help on people who have issues with financial management and credit management. So we are doing that, and we hope to complete that by middle of next year. The third one is on strengthening institutional arrangement and capacity building, including financial literacy. We have worked with AFI on 3 areas, microfinance, payment system, and also on consumer protection and literacy. We have learned a lot. Not only our people, our internal people have learned, but we are able to engage others who attended that course. That has been quite successful. We have an educational program called POWER, where we have reached about 155,000 people over the last 12 months. So we hope to have more than 200,000 people by end of next year. And on monitoring and tracking mechanism, in Bank Negara Malaysia, we have one tool which we call the Financial Inclusion Index. It's a composite index basically to measure whether we have been moving from beginning of the year until end of the year. At the beginning of the year, our index, about 12 months ago during the Maya declaration, our index was about 0.77. Now it's about 0.86. So the full compliance is about 1. So we measure about 4 areas: take-up, usage, accessibility, and satisfaction by the consumer. So we hope that to improve it to beyond 90% at least by 2015. Another area that we have done internally, and this is propagated by our governor, is on the business plan. We have every 3 years we have a business plan that we look at what are the things we need to do over the next 3 years. And one of the things that we look at is the financial inclusion. So we set target. But more importantly, those targets serve as the performance appraisal of the staff. Meaning that if it doesn't work, my director there, Kamari, will have to explain himself. And if that doesn't work, I have to explain myself to my governor. And then that will impact our bonus and our salaries. And the governor can be very, very strict on that. I can assure you that. So now you know where the motivation comes from. We are also embarking on an area of microfinance, which is leadership. We noticed that over the years, that microfinance require a different type of leadership. So the Asian Institute of Finance embarked on a program of leadership. I think so far we have done 2 programs, and it has been successful, and we're going to promote this particular area in future. There are 2 areas that we are embarking. These are my last 2 points, Governor. I will end very, very quickly. 2 areas which we also want to learn from the rest. One is that we have embarked on research and development on how to improve the capacity building of micro-enterprise. It's very important. I think the point was made very, very clearly yesterday that micro-enterprises form the bulk of business enterprises in Malaysia. In fact, it form the bulk of the SME in Malaysia. So we need to improve the capacity there. And then secondly, I think Daniel have raised this. We also want to improve thoroughly the microfinance, micro-insurance and micro-takaful. Micro-takaful is the equivalent of Islamic insurance. So we want to come up with a product that consumers have to pay only about $5 to $10 per month in order to cover their risks. Thank you, Governor.
All right. Thank you very much. Again, here is a case of extremely rapid progress, technology intensive, but also looking at all other avenues to make further progress. And now we will be moving to the next category of presenters. These are facilitators in country, in regions, and we'll start with Gabe Tata, Director, Financial and Private Sector Development of the World Bank.
Thank you very much, Governor Benno. So 2 years ago, the World Bank set up its Financial Inclusion Global Practice, about 3 months before the Maya Declaration. So it was almost as if we were formed to serve AFI. I'm not sure that the bank would like to hear me saying that, but almost by coincidence, I think we started off at the same time. And we found, in fact, that this self-commitment process that AFI initiated was extremely powerful because it gave us a set of countries that we knew were committed to working on this agenda. And so following on the work that AFI did, and also I think what they did on getting commitments under the Maya Declaration also initiated a similar process in the G20. All of this allowed us, therefore, to come up with our own approach to supporting this. So we are following what the country commitments are. And we launched at our spring meetings last year a financial inclusion support framework for the countries that have committed under the AFI Maya Declaration. And our initial thinking was to begin with about 6 countries to try and help them to get to scale, which will be sort of a key part of that work, and eventually to cover 15 countries. But I think at the rate that countries are self-committing, it seems like much more support may be needed. Now, what is this support going to look at, and why is the focus so much at the country level? I think you've already made an important point that clearly, whilst the regulators and the ministries of finance that are involved in AFI come and make commitments, there is a need for national coordination mechanisms. And I think Mexico had spoken very eloquently to this question of how do you bring together financial inclusion through national coordination structures. So I think that's one important element of why we are following to the country level. The second element is also that if we are looking at trying to coordinate partners, the best place to do it is in country. And so what we are looking for, therefore, is to work very closely at the country level. The second part of this financial inclusion support framework is also then to help look more broadly at what are the global knowledge gaps and how can we help fill them. And in fact, in the session before this one, there were several ideas put on the table where AFI members might want to work to develop their knowledge base. And I think this is something, again, where as a global knowledge partner, the World Bank would be very interested to work with AFI in identifying some key areas where additional research might be helpful. Finally, I think I want to speak a bit to many of the other things that we are doing that will help very much in the area of financial inclusion. So for many years, we've had global data on supply side of financial services, but there has not been, until recently, much information available on the demand side of financial services. And using the Gallup poll and funding from the Gates Foundation, about a year ago, the World Bank launched a financial inclusion demand-side data index called Findex, which captures this information across 140 countries. Secondly, we are also doing a global payment survey every 2 years, which will be available later this year. And for the first time, we have launched a consumer protection survey, which has already received responses from 115 of you. So we thank you very much for contributing to that. And it will give us for the first time a global picture on what are the variations in consumer protection across countries. Finally, we are doing quite a bit of work trying to look at what are the knowledge gaps today. And I think one area that's been mentioned a lot is actually on financial capability and literacy. It was quite amusing, actually, that we went and saw a number of small children in your museum next door trying to learn different financial concepts. But there's a lot of questioning as to what is the efficacy, what is the impact. And for the first time, we are trying to do randomized controlled trials and trying to actually find the relative differences in impact of different financial capability methods, ranging from the statements of interest, et cetera, and what impact they have, to the other extreme of looking at entertainment education. And some of the things we are evaluating is what is the actual impact of soap operas in South Africa and Nigeria? Have they actually led to any systematic change in consumer behavior? So I think we are working on a number of these areas. We certainly welcome our collaboration with AFI and AFI members, whether through the association or at the individual country level. And we look forward to continuing to support the country-led process of improving financial inclusion.
Well, everybody's keeping time quite well. So again, thank you very much for a clear presentation that shows how the World Bank is supportive of implementation of national strategies through knowledge and capacity and other financial related support. But there's only one question I wanted to ask you. Sometimes when it comes to programs, country programs, there has been a tendency of wanting to pull in the Maya commitments into conditions in terms of targets. I know it's not typically from your type of directorate. It's more from the other ones that we deal with. But maybe not to ask you a question whether you support that or not. It won't be fair, but if you wanted just to comment on this.
Sure. I think certainly financial inclusion from the perspective of actually World Bank programs is a fairly new area. And I think when we look at the financial sector, typically, a lot of our conversations with central banks and a lot of our program content has really been looking at financial stability issues or capital market development issues. So I think financial inclusion is a relatively new area. I think with the focus historically on financial inclusion, which is also where our colleagues from IFC have been involved, has been very much on the SME side. But the household side of financial inclusion, and when I say financial inclusion, I'm talking about savings beyond credit, at savings, at microinsurance, at payment systems. These are new areas that are under development. And so I think what may tend to happen is because a lot of the country strategies so far do not cover financial inclusion directly, there may be a tendency to actually use what has been developed through the Maya Declaration as a proxy. But I think as we've heard in this conversation, very often as you actually go into implementation, and as you suggested yourself, there may be need to actually adjust these targets. So treating them as something that's very hard and fast would actually be counterproductive. So I would agree with you that these are an important area, but certainly simply because they are country-led commitments, it would be important not to take them at face value and to understand that they need to be adjusted.
Okay. Thank you. Next, we have Elizabeth Ryan, Managing Director, Center for Financial Inclusion.
Thank you, Governor. Is this on? Yes.
Yeah?
So for those of you who may not be familiar, the Center for Financial Inclusion is an independent think tank based in Washington that's associated with Acción International and comes out of the microfinance roots, but is very much focused on financial inclusion today. I think what's relevant here that we have been working on is a project called Financial Inclusion 2020, which is really about bringing the financial inclusion community together around a goal of reaching full financial inclusion within a reasonable time frame. The governor of Nigeria spoke about 2020, which is what we think is an interesting aspiration to look at. And when I say the financial inclusion community, I think we've been talking about, in the last 2 days, the financial inclusion community represented here among AFI members, but we also have to remember that that community includes providers, support organizations, and clients or client representatives, as well as the regulators. And so one of the things that we are trying to do with our Financial Inclusion 2020 project is to bring all the stakeholders in financial inclusion together to have a dialogue about this. And another one of the focus areas that we have is really helping to promote the idea in the broader business community and the broader media world that financial inclusion is an important national and global goal. And for that, we are developing messages that really build the business case around financial inclusion. And that business case is built on the idea that demographic and income changes in the developing world that are coming up, as well as technological advances that we've been talking about in the last 2 days, create an enormous market opportunity for the private sector to serve people that they've never served before. And so we want to promote the idea with these potential providers that financial inclusion is something that they should look at. And we already have a great deal of interest here, and some of the sponsors of the Financial Inclusion 2020 project are here today with MasterCard and Visa, both here. Citibank is another big sponsor. The Gates Foundation is a sponsor. And so we have a lot of strong private sector interest, but the message is really that the market opportunity is very large here. And going along with that is the idea that while the market opportunity is large, it's also a group of people who are vulnerable and who are unfamiliar and who are different from the people that the private sector may be used to serving. And so there is a getting to know you process and a client protection process that's needed. And so the Financial Inclusion 2020 project is really about having that dialogue, and we very much appreciate AFI participation and regulator participation in that dialogue, but we believe that it's necessary to have a dialogue that includes all the stakeholders. So that sort of gives you a background on where I was coming from, but what I really wanted to do in this panel was to take a quick look at the Maya Declaration itself, and if there's a slide here that could be shown, which I hope.
Slide, please.
Yes, great. So what we have here is a very, very basic analysis of the Maya commitments by going through all of the Maya commitments and categorizing them. I hope you can read some of this, but I just wanted to make a few comments about what's shown here about the Maya commitments, and it really reflects the idea that the Maya commitments were a first round, and I'm really happy today that the Sasana Accords will be taking that forward, and I would expect that same kind of moving forward would be continuing to happen. But so one reflection is that really AFI's topic areas are strongly reflected here, with mobile, electronic, and agent banking being more than 25 countries, consumer protection, financial literacy, and education also being very important. And the process of collecting better data and reporting on that data also being a really major theme here. And so, that it just reflects the way that AFI's priorities are being, maybe I shouldn't say AFI's priorities, maybe I should say your priorities are reflected in what the subjects that AFI is also talking about. On the other hand, one of the things to comment on as something that needs work is the small number of numerical targets here. I don't know if you can see that, but there are only 16 countries with specific client outreach targets and 2 with location-specific targets. Now, I realize that the Maya declarations are a high-level picture, and underneath there was quite a bit more going on, but the move to make more specific targets is really terrific. Over on the very right-hand side, I wanted to make sure to comment on this very interesting set of pictures regarding access, use, and quality, where what you see here is that 21 of the commitments reflect a commitment to increase access, but only 8 reflect a commitment to increase use, and only 3 mention quality. So what I see is that this is a progression, that we begin with access, we move to use, and we move to quality. But I also don't know that we need to wait to work on quality. Working on quality should be going hand in hand with working on access and usage. And I wanted to just make a few comments on what's here in relation to the dialogue that's been going on in the financial inclusion.
In 1 minute?
Oh, yep, I'm almost finished. The Financial Inclusion 2020 project has been coming up with a dialogue on priorities, and some of these are reflected here, and some of them are different. One is a deeper examination needed of financial capability and consumer protection, especially one that connects with the role of providers in both of those areas, and that providers have a major role in each of those areas. Another area is data privacy and protection has really been coming out as an emerging issue that needs much more attention. And finally, one of the things that you note here is that only 2 countries have any kind of a target related to credit bureaus and credit reporting, and this is clearly a priority area that needs to have a lot more attention. So going forward, I urge you to think about setting your targets in a process that has all the stakeholders represented, including the entire financial inclusion community.
Well, thank you very much for analysis of the commitments overall. I think that has added useful information. Now, to conclude, is Mark Bichler, Executive Secretary, UNCDF.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you. I will not have the ambition to conclude, but let me try to give some additional points of information on maybe first of all who UNCDF is, and then on how we help to implement commitments under the Maya Declaration. UNCDF is the United Nations Capital Investment Agency. As such, we provide investment capital.
Capital Investment
Agency. Yes. Yeah. We have a
YDF.
CDF.
Oh,
Capital,
CDF.
Capital Development Fund providing investment capital. Okay. Yeah. As such, we have a mandate, a financial mandate that goes beyond providing grants, but we can also work in loans and credit enhancement mechanisms. And we work mainly in two areas, one being microfinance and inclusive finance. That's the reason why we are here. The other being local development finance. We target geographically mainly on the least developed countries, but not exclusively. Now, why is it important for us to work with AFI? Because we share with AFI the 4 policy pillars that have been decided on. But we also think it is important to work with AFI on financial inclusion, because through financial inclusion, of course, we help to improve income levels of poor populations. But beyond that, and that's important for a UN agency, beyond that, we also contribute to development results in the social sectors of reducing child mortality and improving also primary school enrollment. Now, how do we go about it? And in order to be useful for time management, go briefly to a very concrete example of how we help to implement the Maya Declaration commitments. We did so in putting in place a tool that we call MAP, Making Access Possible. It's not a mapping tool as Daniel Szydlowski was describing of a geographic nature. This is more of a diagnostic tool that helps us to map out the needs on the one side and then also the opportunities on the other side. So the elements, the very important elements of this program is an evidence-based diagnostic tool that helps us to bring about the data with regard to the demand side for inclusive finance on the one side, and the data for the supply side, again, for financial inclusion. We cherish the multi-stakeholder approach in our program, because we think, of course, that speaking to the authorities from the financial sector is essential, but it is probably not enough to bring about financial inclusion. That's why we reach out, of course, to the authorities of the kind of the central banks, but beyond to all the branches of government and to the private sector, and we promote a very strong donor coordination as well. The program is supposed, after initial 18 months, to come up with a design of a roadmap for financial inclusion for a given country, keeping in mind that, of course, the national authorities have the lead in defining that roadmap together with us and with all the partners, with all the drivers for financial inclusion that we have identified and that have worked with us in doing so. Finally, this roadmap of course, is only the start of an implementation phase that may quite well go through 3 or 4 years, because this is a long process. Again, development, including for financial inclusion, does not happen from one day to another. Now, we have also already, after 2 years of running these programs, first lessons learned, and if I may share those, that might be useful for those who might join us in the future. First of all,
in 1 minute.
In 1 minute, so that's about, yeah, that's about 15 seconds per lesson. We need, of course, in order to be successful, we need very strong and formal endorsement by the government for these programs, and we call also on a strong leadership by the government to lead in a multi-stakeholder approach, without which we would not have the expected results. Secondly, of course, we couldn't stress more the importance of collaborative partnerships between governments, donors, and obviously also the private sector. Thirdly, again, I would like to bring home also the message on the need for integrated sets of data with regard to the demand side and with regard to the supply side. Finally, we also, as a UN agency, of course, this should come naturally to us. We plead for a strong donor coordination, especially when it comes to implementing, in order to avoid counterproductive effects or duplications as have happened before. Now, we will, of course, keep on expanding our dialogue with AFI and also make AFI profit from progress reports in other areas, like the promotion of the transition from digital payments, from cash payments, to digital payments. That's one issue that we would like to stress, and I see that the time is definitely running out, and I will stop here. I will, of course, make myself available for further questions. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much for first introducing UNCDF to all of us, so that we have a much better knowledge of what you can provide. Now, I need to get some guidance here. The program had said we go until 1610 for the last event. So if you want to cut it off now, then I'll say a few words and we'll be ready to stop. Because I know the Prime Minister is coming.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, we have another very important component to be implemented now. That's new commitments to Maya Declaration.
Yeah, that's what
But to make it possible, yes, we need to first of all end this.
Yes.
Then I would welcome you all down from the podium.
Yes.
And then we will continue.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe just in a minute, just to make sure that, I'm sorry we don't have time actually to be able to get the interaction with the audience that we should have, and this probably goes partly to my suggestion that ultimately part of what will drive all of us to implement Maya commitments is peer pressure. And peer pressure cannot happen without appearing before peers. You can appear electronically, I know, which means it is important to try and make sure maybe during the GPFs, if we can circulate, the progress reports of all countries, even if they have been circulated, online as we go, partly just to give us all possibility to be able to interrogate and to discuss with our counterparts that are doing similar things. Second, I would suggest that at least you have a 2-hour slot for this important progress review, because that's where we learn from each other. And believe me, not everybody goes online diligently as you would wish to be able to learn this. So this is usually an important opportunity. So with those two suggestions, we are ready to come down from the skies.
Let me thank you, first of all of you. Thank